Welcome. Settle in, dear listener. Perhaps you are lying in bed or resting in a quiet corner with the day behind you. Tonight, we will take a journey together, a gentle journey through time, across mountains, seas, and empires. We will follow the story of a humble leaf, a leaf that has soothed kings and workers alike, that has sparked revolutions, and that has offered quiet comfort for thousands of years. This is the history of tea across empires. Let us begin, not in the bustling streets of London or the great palaces of Europe, but in the quiet, mist-covered mountains of ancient China. Legend tells us of Shennong, the divine farmer, a sage emperor who lived more than 4,000 years ago. Shennong is remembered for teaching the people the art of agriculture, the secrets of plants, and the healing knowledge of herbs. One day, as the story goes, the emperor sat beneath a wild tea tree, boiling water to drink. A gentle breeze carried with it a single leaf. It floated down and settled into his pot. As the water turned faintly golden, an aroma rose into the air. The emperor tasted the brew and found it refreshing, soothing, and clear. And so, the story of tea begins. At first, tea was not simply a drink. It was a medicine, a way to ease the body, to quiet the mind. Villagers gathered wild leaves, boiled them in clay pots, and drank the infusion with reverence. By the time of the Tang dynasty, more than 1,000 years later, tea was no longer just medicine. It had become a daily pleasure. Tea houses stood in the heart of cities, their wooden beams perfumed with steam and smoke. Inside, scholars unfurled scrolls of poetry, musicians played soft melodies on zithers, and artists painted delicate landscapes. All the while, porcelain cups were filled and refilled with fragrant tea. It was during this time that a great scholar named Lu Yu wrote the Classic of Tea. In his book, he described not only how to brew tea, but how to appreciate it fully. The water must be pure, he said, the fire gentle, the space calm and undisturbed. To drink tea was to seek harmony, to balance body and spirit. Imagine, if you will, a Tang dynasty tea house at dusk. The lanterns are lit, glowing amber against dark wooden walls. Patrons sit cross-legged on mats, the air filled with quiet conversation. A clay teapot rests on the table, steam drifting like incense. Outside, the evening crickets begin their song, and the world slows to the pace of boiling water. From the mountain valleys of China, tea began its quiet journey outward. Along with Buddhist monks who carried scrolls of wisdom, sacred statues, and ancient sutras, came small packets of tea seeds. In the early 9th century, a Japanese monk named Saicho returned from China, bringing with him these treasured leaves. Other monks followed, and slowly the practice of drinking tea took root in Japan. For these monks, tea was not simply refreshment. It was a companion to meditation. Imagine the long hours of chanting sutras, sitting cross-legged in candlelight, the body weary, the mind drifting. A bowl of powdered green tea, whisked into froth, helped sharpen awareness and keep the spirit awake. Over centuries, this practice deepened into something profound. The Japanese tea ceremony, known as chanoyu, emerged. Guided by Zen principles, the ceremony was not about luxury or indulgence. It was about humility, about finding beauty in simplicity. Picture a small, quiet room, the walls plain, the light soft. A kettle simmers gently, and the host, dressed in simple robes, bows with grace. With slow, deliberate movements, they scoop vivid green matcha into a bowl, whisk it into foam, and present it with both hands. Every sound is noticed: the trickle of water, the soft rustle of robes, the faint tap of porcelain. Every movement has meaning. To drink tea here is not to quench thirst, but to step into harmony. The great tea master, Sen no Rikyu, taught that tea was four things: harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. These ideals transformed the humble act of sipping tea into a mirror of life itself. And so, in Japan, tea became not only a drink, but a philosophy, a way of slowing down, of appreciating each fleeting moment. Beyond temple walls, tea spread into villages and towns, into gardens and homes. The tea bowl, simple and unadorned, became as valued as gold. For within its plainness was the spirit of mindfulness. In time, tea in Japan came to embody the beauty of imperfection, what the Japanese call wabi-sabi. The cracked glaze on a cup, the uneven edge of a bowl, the fleeting taste of tea itself, all became reminders that nothing lasts forever. Thus, from China to Japan, tea had already begun to weave itself into culture and soul. And soon, its journey would extend even farther, across deserts, mountains, and rivers, to the Silk Roads. From Japan's temples and quiet gardens, our journey now turns back toward China and the great networks of trade that would carry tea across vast distances. The Silk Roads, not one road, but a web of routes, stretched across mountains, deserts, and steppes. For centuries, these roads carried silk, spices, precious stones, and porcelain. And among these treasures was tea. In the early centuries of trade, tea was often pressed into hard bricks. These bricks were light to carry, durable, and could even be used as currency. A single brick of tea might be worth a horse or a bolt of fine cloth. Caravans wound their way across Central Asia. Picture the long lines of camels, their bells chiming softly in the dry wind. Bales of tea stacked high on their backs, guarded by traders wrapped in wool and leather. Steppe nomads, desert wanderers, and mountain peoples all came to know the taste of tea. In Tibet, tea was boiled with yak butter and salt, creating a thick, nourishing drink. In Mongolia, it was blended with milk, rich and sustaining for harsh winters. In Central Asia, it was poured into carved bowls, shared among family and guests alike. With every mile it travelled, tea adapted, transformed, and became part of new cultures. By the Ming dynasty in the 14th century, loose-leaf tea had become more common than pressed bricks. And with it came delicate porcelain cups, their surfaces painted with clouds, flowers, and dragons. These cups, fragile, luminous, refined, would soon find their way across the seas, carrying not just tea, but the artistry of China itself. By the 16th century, great ships from Europe had begun to sail farther east than ever before. Portuguese traders, followed by the Dutch, dropped anchor in the harbours of China. They loaded their vessels with silks, porcelain, spices, and, among them, the curious dried leaves of tea. The first chests of tea to reach Europe were rare and costly. Reserved for nobles and wealthy merchants, they were treated almost like medicine. Brewed carefully, sipped slowly, and spoken of in whispers of wonder. In 1610, the Dutch East India Company began regular shipments of tea. Soon, the drink spread from Amsterdam to Paris, from Lisbon to London. Aristocrats gathered in salons, lifting delicate porcelain cups and delighting in this new, exotic beverage. In England, tea's popularity soared when Catherine of Braganza, The Portuguese princess who married King Charles II brought her love of tea to the royal court. Soon, tea drinking was no longer just a novelty. It was a fashion, a symbol of refinement. Coffee houses in London, once bustling with strong brews of coffee, began serving tea as well. They became known as penny universities, where for the price of a cup, one could sit and hear the latest news or join in lively debate. At first, tea was expensive, a luxury for the rich. But slowly, through trade and smuggling alike, it began to enter the homes of common people. And with it came new rituals. The pause for afternoon tea, the serving of biscuits and small cakes, the quiet comfort of a hot cup at day's end. Europe had discovered tea, and soon the thirst for it would grow insatiable. As the 18th century dawned, tea was no longer a curiosity in Britain. It was a passion. Ship after ship of the East India Company carried tea from the ports of Canton to the docks of London. Tea became the lifeblood of empire, a source of profit, a reason for taxes, and a daily ritual for millions. But across the Atlantic, in Britain's American colonies, resentment was growing. Taxes on tea were heavy, and colonists began to see the drink as a symbol of control. On a cold December night in 1773, a group of men disguised as Mohawk warriors crept aboard ships in Boston Harbor. One by one, they pried open crates of British tea and cast them into the sea. The water turned dark with leaves, the smell of tea rising into the frosty air. This protest, remembered as the Boston Tea Party, sent ripples across the world. From it grew anger, revolution, and the birth of a new nation. Yet Britain's appetite for tea did not diminish. By the 19th century, demand had grown so great that the empire sought new ways to secure supply. In China, trade imbalances deepened. Britain paid for tea with silver, but soon began to export opium instead. Addiction spread, anger mounted, and the Opium Wars erupted. Wars that reshaped the balance between East and West. For Britain, one answer lay in its colony of India. There, on the slopes of Assam and Darjeeling, vast plantations of tea would rise. But that is the next chapter of our journey. In the misty hills of Assam and Darjeeling, another chapter of tea's story began. Though India had wild tea plants of its own, the leaves were long ignored. It was the British, eager to break China's monopoly on tea, who looked to these fertile slopes. By the 19th century, vast plantations were carved into the land. Hillsides once thick with jungle now rolled with neat green rows of tea bushes. Thousands of labourers, men, women and children, worked long hours, plucking tender leaves by hand. The teas of Assam, strong and malty, and the fragrant floral teas of Darjeeling soon gained fame across the world. By the late 1800s, India had become one of the largest producers of tea on earth. For many in India, tea was first a colonial product, but over time it became something deeply local. Street vendors mixed black tea with milk, sugar, and spices like ginger and cardamom. This became chai, a drink of warmth, comfort, and hospitality. Today, chai is not just a drink. It is a daily ritual, a shared cup between neighbours, a gesture of welcome. And though it grew from the colonial pursuit of empire, it became something profoundly Indian. Far to the north, in the cold expanses of Russia, tea travelled by camel caravan. Across the rugged trails of Siberia, the leaves made their way from China into the heart of Moscow. The journey was long, often taking more than a year. The tea arrived tightly packed into bricks, sturdy enough to survive months of travel. In Russian homes, tea became a drink of gathering and warmth. At the center of the table stood the samovar, a tall, ornate vessel of brass or silver. Inside, hot coals kept water simmering. A small teapot, filled with concentrated brew, rested on top. Each guest poured a little of this strong tea, then diluted it with steaming water. The ritual was slow, communal, and deeply comforting. In the frost of Russian winters, tea was more than refreshment. It was survival, warmth against the cold, and a symbol of hospitality. To the west, across deserts and bustling markets, tea took on yet another life. In Persia, in Turkey, in Morocco, tea became a language of welcome. In Istanbul, small tulip-shaped glasses held dark black tea, often served strong and sweet. In Iran, tea houses, called chai khane, became places of gathering for stories, poetry, and conversation. In Morocco, green tea met fresh mint leaves, a blend that sparkled with fragrance. Pouring it high into slender glasses, the host filled the air with aroma and with tradition. Across the Middle East, tea was not rushed. It was savored. To drink tea was to sit, to pause, to be present with others. The 19th century gave rise to a new age, the Industrial Age, a time of steel, steam, and invention. And with it, tea changed forever. Once, tea had been a luxury, a treasure of emperors and nobility. But with new machines, vast plantations, and faster ships, tea became something else. A drink for the masses. Steamships now cut across the seas with speed unthinkable to camel caravans or sailing junks. Iron railways carried tea inland, linking ports to cities, workers to factories, and families to the hearth. In England, afternoon tea blossomed into a cultural ritual. For the working class, tea breaks offered rest from the factory floor. A pot of strong black tea, sweetened with sugar, gave weary labourers the strength to continue. In the United States, tea found new forms. At the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis, vendors poured tea over ice, creating iced tea, a refreshing twist that spread across America. Just a few years later, another accident shaped the future of tea. A merchant shipped samples in small silk bags. Customers, unsure of how to use them, dipped the bags directly into hot water. Thus, the tea bag was born. Simple, convenient, and soon, universal. Advertising, too, played its role. Bright posters lined city streets, promising energy, health, and comfort in every cup. Tea had become not just a drink, but a household necessity. Today, tea flows everywhere, from the neon cities of Tokyo to the chai stalls of Delhi, from London's cafes to the mountain villages of Morocco. In our modern world, tea wears many forms. Some still prefer the traditions, the quiet grace of a Japanese ceremony, the steady warmth of a Russian samovar. Others turn to new creations, bubble tea with pearls of sweetness, herbal blends crafted for health, delicate white teas, oolongs of infinite fragrance. For many, tea is tied to wellness. Green tea, rich with antioxidants. Herbal infusions said to calm, to heal, to soothe. Around the globe, new voices also ask us to reflect, to consider where tea comes from, who grows it, and under what conditions. Fair trade, organic farming, and sustainability are becoming part of tea's living story. And yet, despite all the change, the heart of tea is the same. A simple leaf, steeped in hot water, shared among friends, or savoured alone in silence. In this way, the story of tea is not finished. It is still unfolding, with every cup poured in every corner of the world. And so, we return to the beginning. A simple leaf discovered long ago in the quiet forests of China. From emperors to monks, from traders to explorers, from workers in fields to families at kitchen tables, tea has touched every layer of human life. Across centuries, tea has been a symbol of hospitality, of reflection, and of rest. Tonight, as you listen, perhaps a cup rests at your side, its warmth rising into the stillness, its fragrance weaving softly into the air. May this story remind you that history is not only battles and empires. Sometimes it is found in the smallest things: a leaf, a cup, a pause in the day. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the history of tea. May your evening be calm, your dreams peaceful, and your heart as warm as the very first sip. Subscribe for more relaxing stories from history. Good night.